All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get going here, just because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk with you. People will roll in as the time goes on because women sometimes, like in this movement, we're so busy all the time that we lose track of the time. So we're just going to get going here. Thank you for joining us for our episode of Red Tent Storytellers. Myself and Hazel Moon are the co-hosts. She is the co-host, even though it's a speaker. And we have the wonderful Cynthia Breheny with us today. If you are not familiar with Cynthia's work, she's an author, she's an illustrator, she's one of the founders of Paradox Institute. And we're just really excited that you took time out of your busy schedule. You go testify. You have one of the most full schedules I have ever come across. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just come and talk with us. So I just want to get started and let's take it back. This we want to go back and let's talk about before we get to Don't Feed the Fears, Paradox, everything. Let's go back to you and if you would tell us a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, like where, like I know, but for our audience, are you a country girl? Are you a city girl? What was it like for you?
I'm kind of a low income southern suburbs girl, so I can get a little southern twang if I'm so inclined. Usually, if I'm like thinking something's particularly absurd or something like that. And then my mom's family immigrated from Cuba when my mother was really little, so I have a very strong cultural Cuban background. Um, and yeah, it was kind of a low income neighborhood, a lot of drugs in and out. It was not the best environment to grow up in. Um, it was kind of all over the place. But yeah, it definitely it diversified my background as far as like who I got to meet growing up and experiences I got to have, and gave me a lot of funny stories to go forward with. Um, but yeah, it was pretty. Other than that, I'd say it was pretty normal as far as like a 90s kid, like growing up with those classic TV shows like on Nickelodeon and stuff like that. Which I have to say, had I not had those 90s cartoons and talk shows, like daytime talk shows and things like that, I don't know where I would be. My family was not exactly the type that I could go to for advice. Just they're full of drama and contradictions. And I think the TV programs that were out were probably the only thing that like grounded me in like what was normal, like acceptable behavior, and also what was abnormal. So then I knew certain things weren't normal. Like I've talked about this before. Had it not been for daytime talk shows, I would not know what gender identity disorder was. I would not know what an eating disorder was, both things I struggled with as a kid. And I wouldn't know that people went to therapy. I wouldn't know that like on the flip side, I also wouldn't know what tomboys were, and that you could be a girl in a backwards baseball cap and jeans and be, like still be a girl. So it was like a really like mixed like period of time, like mixed messaging and stuff like that. But um, ultimately, I have to credit that for
I
coming
think the
out okay.
90s gets a bad rap. I
Yeah.
think the 90s in a lot of ways because you had like the Wall Street era and all of that stuff and it was uh everyone was like you it was the supermodels, right? And all these other things. But I think for your, average person, your story about you learned what normal was from television. I think a lot of us, because I think we're talking to the 80s and 90s kids, were latchkey kids. And for our younger listeners who might not know what that means, we were kind of the first generations, late 70s, the 80s, and early 90s. Both the our mothers were working, or both parents were, if both parents were in the house. And latchkey was basically, we all had to come home to an empty house and we had to fend for ourselves. And it was very common in the US. Are you a latchkey kid? And that was like the kids also who weren't doing sports or any kind of after school activities. You just went home, you either walked or you rode the bus, and you went home and you let yourself in, and you took care of yourself in a way. And I think you're absolutely right about the talk shows, right? And when you said that, I had never even really considered that. Like Phil Donahue, Oprah back in the day, back when they talked about uncomfortable things. Yes, it morphed into some weird stuff, right? But I think overall, they actually served a really good purpose back in the '90s. The talk shows.
Yeah, definitely. Like it made me feel like I wasn't the only person in the whole world having these thoughts and feelings. And I think seeing that and seeing how other people were dealing with it helped me be a lot more calm about it and introspective, because it wasn't necessarily like back then, if somebody said, I've been living as a man for, you know, 10 years or whatever, and it wasn't like immediately celebrated, right? Like the audience was like, oh, I can't believe this. This is like, what? Like everyone was like aghast. And the host would often challenge it and ask questions. And it was really good to see that at the time, that it was like kind of an aberration, that it wasn't normal, that people were, it's like we're allowed to ask these questions, and um, seeing it get challenged as opposed to celebrated, because it opened up some ugly truths about it, and it helped me not completely buy into I was meant to be a boy. It, I mean, I still felt that I was meant to be to a degree, but seeing other people go through that and seeing them get challenged on it was like, okay, I need to think about this a little bit more and be more cautious about it, because there's something that's not quite, it was, you're a little kid, so you can't like fully grasp what it is that's not adding up about it. But that plus the messaging of girls can be anything, girls can have any hobby, girls can cut their hair short. And that was something we were seeing kind of on TV for the first time ever, right? Like lesbians and like butches and short haircuts being accepted in men. It was, we also saw a lot on TV about that woman who identified as a man. I can't remember her last name, but she went by Matthew, I think. And she had been murdered. And because, like, allegedly because she was trans identified. Um, and so we saw a lot of that coming out of the early 90s. And so it really kind of, I don't want to say like, because a lot of people blame the media now for like influencing kids, but it didn't necessarily influence me in a bad way. It just let me know that there were other people who felt this way, and that there was something about it that wasn't 100% right. And there was something about it that, like, maybe I needed to examine a little bit more. But it did let me know that I wasn't alone. So at the same time, there was that thing of like, maybe it is a viable option. I don't know. But I think the messaging that was like challenging it was good to have.
When did you first decide that you wanted to try writing? When was that moment for you? Were you a child, a young adult? When did Cynthia the writer start to peek from behind the curtain?
I was a kid. I was always an introspective kid, and I was a very lonely kid. I think because I did have such a strong like multicultural background, I had a hard time relating to the other kids at school. Also, I had a hard time relating to girls. So it was just, I felt super lonely. And I was a very in my head kid. So I was you wouldn't even know I was there. Like my family forgot to pick me up from school a lot because they just assumed I was already home because I was just always so quiet. And so like I started writing to collect my thoughts, but also to kind of try and, I guess, articulate observations about the world through storytelling. And my, my one story that I remember writing the most is I was in third grade and I wrote this love story between these raccoons, and the female raccoon ended up like dying from an illness or something. The male raccoon committed suicide to be with her. It's like, what third grader is writing that? But so, but I was like really into to reading like Edgar Allan Poe at the time, and just all of these like brooding authors and poets around that age. Because I found my friends in books instead of other kids.
Do you, and we're going to talk about Don't Feed the Fears, because I feel like the childhood that you're talking about 100% was the reason how that book came about. Do you, do you feel like when you were a kid that I know for me, I almost get a contact high when I make someone feel good, but at the same time, if they're feeling bad, I soak that all in. So I sometimes wonder if when we are more empathetic people like that, it's overwhelming as kids to like we already in our own heads and for whatever's going on in our homes and then that and we don't have the terminology at our age back then of anxiety or any of that stuff. um do you feel, because and I know that you're an empathetic person, you wouldn't be in this fight, you would not put up with the abuse and having to constantly correct the lies about DSDs and all of that if you didn't have a really large heart, right? You have a big heart and you care. And I wonder, do you think as a kid, I mean, you wouldn't have known then, but looking back, do you think that the emotions around you of others kind of made it easier to go inside and just read and just be, have books be your only friends?
I think so. I always wanted to try and help other people, I guess, because kind of like how you were saying, like I needed help. So it made me feel good to help other people. I think it helped me feel a little bit more in control when I felt so out of control at home. And I think that's part of what I liked about books and what I liked about writing was everything kind of made sense. Everything had rules. And I could also soak in those other experiences, like you were talking about, and apply them to help me make sense of my world and the world in general. Because, like, everything was so confusing at home, like mixed messages constantly. I knew I couldn't trust any of the adults around me to articulate things in a way that made sense or make me feel safe. So it was it was nice to have these books, and I mean TV told stories at the time. Like it was one of my favorite shows of all time is this Batman series that's animated from the 90s. Um and just to see like him struggle with his own issues of like how much of myself do I sacrifice to help others? How much of myself am I sacrificing in futility? Like that was a big one for me. There's like a whole episode where he talks to a therapist about it. And I know that sounds really sappy and like a lot of people might see that as like woke or something, but it was really well done. Um, and, and it helped me as a kid be like, yeah, like you can help people, but it is also important to value yourself, which is always something I struggled with. Um, but I mean, I think having stories was probably the thing that saved me the most, was just having the ability to read them, watch them, and take them in a way that I probably wouldn't have had access to maybe in another time. And I think kids have really lost that now. Like, we've seen statistics where kids can't read, they're not interpreting things deeply, they're just kind of like told a message. And if you don't repeat that message, you're a bad person. And it's weaponizing their empathy against them, which is really horrible. So, yeah, it saved me, and I really hope that we get more of that out there, and that's what I'm trying to do with writing now, with Don't Feed the Fears in particular, is to put that out there for kids so that they can see, like, if you are afraid, if you feed into it, it's okay, like, that's normal, and you will eventually be able to get out of it, but just know that, like, it's just this little fear monster that's out of control. It's nothing wrong with you necessarily.
I think you're spot on about today. There's a disconnect for a lot of kids. I think there's a majority of kids out there. If we sat them down with a book in front of them and said, "Entertain yourself," they would look at us like there was something wrong with us. Because I think a lot of it for social media and their phones, their attention spans aren't. I feel I'm really saddened by the fact that kids today can't immerse themselves in a book, and see how amazing that is, because in your head, that's how the in your brain interprets the perfect hero. This is what the hero or heroine looks like, and this is what the villain looks like in your own head. And you're absolutely right, they're becoming one dimensional. And because what's most important isn't what you discover as you get to know to someone. What's most important, they're being taught, is how you announce yourself, right? Your initial announcement of what you believe in will determine your relationship possibly with the person that you're, and that's heavy for a 10-year-old, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's teaching kids that it's not okay to reject someone or reject an idea, and that it's not okay ever to be rejected or to have your ideas rejected, which is harmful in both directions, because it's not teaching good coping skills. And I think it's why we see a lot of these younger generations now who are just flabbergasted when they're not able to just get away with any behavior that they want. They're like, "What do you mean I can't just start filming, myself dancing in the middle of Walmart or something?" Like, it's really um alarming to them that they aren't allowed to just run amok, and it doesn't teach them how to cope with, like, societal standards. It doesn't teach them boundaries for themselves either. I It's really horrific to look into stories of younger girls now. If you read the book Why Gender Matters, it's an excellent book on sex differences, but it also goes into girls who are in high school that they were surveying, and a lot of them are engaging in really violent sexual activities, and it's not consensual, actually, because they don't want to, but they don't have a boundary. They don't know how to say no. They have this toxic empathy that's going, "Well, I really care about this person and I don't want to lose them from my life. And so I'm just going to go along with it, even though I really don't want to." And so it's really, really hurting these younger generations. And then with boys, similar things are happening, because they think they're supposed to just, this is just what you do. And so they're being dumbed down. They're being, um, their boundaries and their ability to cope with behaviors that they aren't supposed to do. They don't understand. They legitimately, they're like little like feral people at this point. They don't understand that there are some things that you're not supposed to do. There are some things you're not supposed to accept for yourself, for your health, because it's not healthy for a male to just give in to violent urges and things like that, obviously. Um, so I'm putting some of that writing skill into creating curriculum, and part of that is I was asked to start working on sex education curriculum. And a big part of that is just going to be sections on boundaries and coping with being rejected or rejecting someone, because that's just totally lost, and it affects these kids into adulthood in so many different aspects, like whether it's their jobs, whether it's interpersonal relationships. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that's been lost on kids. And again, I think part of that is through stories, because the stories that they're reading now are just, this character needs a friend and wants to play with people, so you must play with them, or you are a bad character. You are the bad guy if you don't want to play the same game, and or find a compromise where you have to play with them even if they're really mean to you. Like, you have to find a way to make friends. And it's like, no, you don't actually. You can just say no and be done with it, and it's okay, and doesn't make you a bad guy.
Yeah, no, not everyone liked everyone else in elementary school. I mean, that was just that's not reality. I want to fast forward now because I want to spend some time on Don't Feed the Fierce, but I want to talk about Paradox Institute a little bit. Would you mind giving our audience a little background, when it was founded, uh, who's involved, what you all focus on?
Sure. So it was founded by Zachary Elliott. A lot of you probably follow him on X, but if you don't, I recommend it. And it was founded in 2020 because he really wanted to educate the public on sex differences, because he realized that was not only severely lacking, but purposefully lacking, because people were trying to erase it. And I ended up joining in 2021, just kind of by accident. I just thought he was interesting, and then I became his friend, and we started like making jokes about cooking eggs because of gametes, and and sending him like drawings of raccoons that I was like, I know I said raccoons earlier, but I promise they're not related. But it was because of this trans activist that had a raccoon picture who said like the funniest thing, where he was like, "Explain hyena cock, sir." And it was so hilarious that like I made a comic strip of it, and then I just kept sending him these comic strips. And so then I was like, "Oh, do you want like help? Actually, I can help you with this." And so we ended up developing the self cloud to replace the genderbread person and the gender unicorn. And also around that time, GenSpect had released the gender giraffe, which was heinous because it still pointed to genitals and things like that. I was like, no, let's not. So we did the self cloud, which is about how you can express yourself how you like, but it doesn't change that you're a boy or a girl. And you can decorate your self cloud with your interests and that sort of thing, and it all rhymes. But doesn't change which type of cloud you are, male or female cloud. You're still able to express yourself and have your interests as you like. So that's been a fun worksheet that we have actually gotten into some schools, which was nice. Some teachers who are rebelling against gender ideology were able to download that and share it with their classrooms. Um, and then we ended up just partnering romantically as well, which kind of blew up my life at the time, but because I was getting out of a bad marriage, and I did not think I was going to end up with anybody. I was like, well, I'm I'm good. I raised my siblings. It was like having two kids for me because I essentially adopted them, and I was like, I think I'm okay, oh well. And I was actually trying to get him paired up with my sister, but she had no interest because he was too nice of a guy. She likes bad boys a little bit. And and then I was like, well, you know, I still really want to have him as a friend. And then he ended up pursuing me, and I was like, me? Like I'm like 8 years older than him, so it was kind of a shock. But since getting together, we have done a lot of good work, like getting more videos out, working together, getting books out, working together. We've protected the largest K through 12 swimming organization here in North Carolina because people saw our work and asked us to testify, and we did. We've worked on UN draft resolutions. We've worked on policy across the country. We got our gender affirming care myth pamphlet project done, which was my brainchild, and I was really excited to see it come to fruition. And every time I hand it to somebody, it's like really rewarding because it's like, yes, here, arm yourself with information. This is great. I've got other pamphlet projects that I'd like to work on, but um, we've been doing so much that I haven't been able to get them done yet. The other things definitely take priority. But yeah, so I mean, it's really mostly the two of us. We have two other people who occasionally will write an article for us. But it's really mostly just us working on everything and traveling around and being in calls at least 3 times a week with people. So
Well, yeah, let's talk about the fact the activism. In the sense of most of the time when I reach out to you, you're on another trip to go testify. So when because you do have a little one, you have another one on the way. How is that balancing act for you, right? Because you're a writer, you guys are running Paradox, you're going to testify, you're having a baby, you have a toddler, right? So it's like those are some serious juggling skills, lady.
I'm, it always feels like I'm not doing enough. Um, I have like a compulsive need to just always be doing something. And I don't know if that's like a pathological thing or what, but it's really served me in being able to do everything all at once. But I don't really notice. I mean, we take our daughter with us places, and now we've been able to leave her at home with grandma a little bit more, and she actually is pretty chill with us leaving her at home. She doesn't really cry. She's like, "Okay, you're just going on a trip." And so that's been really nice. I was like really afraid that the first time we left her home, she was going to be devastated, but she was totally fine with it. And yeah, traveling while pregnant and going to this last conference that was just a few weeks ago, and I'm 8 months pregnant now. So it was like, it was quite a bear to be standing up and networking and doing all that as long as I did, but I managed. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't really notice it, and it even still feels like I'm not doing enough. I know that's crazy to say with everything. Like when you say it out loud, like list out things, it sounds like a lot, but to me, I'm like, it doesn't feel like a lot. So I'm used to doing work as a contract artist and animator. So like I'm used to like these long hours, tight turnarounds, difficult personalities, and just kind of struggling to get projects done. And now I'm like, yeah, I can do, a book in a few weeks. That's not a problem. So it's it's
We
interesting.
we need to not get you and Nat together because she suffers from that same spinning plates. I can build. I call her a wizard behind the scenes. So if we get the two of you together, you're just going to take over the world. So okay, so you're tell us a little bit about. I just want to, and we'll just spend a couple minutes on this. You and I have talked in the past about the networking that's required to for especially the smaller group organizations to just try and not even keep up with the big names, but get the message out there. I don't think a lot of us really think about that, especially if we're not doing boots on the ground like you all are in that sense. That's also another plate, right? Because you have to make sure you're keeping in contact with people so they remember that you talked to them about paradox and what you talked about. Am I correct in saying that you have to keep on those connections that you make when you go to these conferences or testify and stuff?
Yeah, you definitely do, which is the hardest part for me because I tell people all the time, I'm just like a spear. Like point me in a direction, give me a target and I can hit that target. But when it comes to the networking side, I'm like, "Oh no, I have to email this person again and I haven't heard from them in a couple weeks, so I'm going to have to reach out." And there's so many people in all these other groups, like the ones that you don't see, because we see some of the boots on the ground activist groups or some activist individuals. Um, like, Erin Friday is just always out there, like working, and we see her and she's great. And we see a lot of these activist moms out there, like Beth Bourne, doing stuff and taking videos and stuff like that. So we see those people and other people see them and it helps keep them in mind. But when you are doing work behind the scenes, like on legislature or writing curriculum or the books or the pamphlets or videos, what have you, you do have to be way more proactive in reaching out to these people and maintaining those connections. And I mean, our Rolodex is like full of these like huge orgs that ask us for advice and help with testimony and things like that. But it's so hard to keep track, especially as a more introverted person. I'm like, I don't want to bother anybody, but I have to. And these people who are doing this like behind the scenes stuff, they're like attorneys and fundraising people and that sort of thing who are like, "No, please bother me. Like I need to be messaged 20 times in order to know that like to set up a call." And it's like so counterintuitive for me. So that's been the biggest struggle. My advice for people who are smaller is find other smaller orgs who are going to respond quickly because I always feel super guilty if we don't respond to people right away. So we're definitely like, if you want to do any kind of activism, if you're looking for your place in the movement or something, like reach out to us and we can give you some advice on who to contact and how to get started, and we'll help you if you need it. Um, but also just go do the work that you can do and put it out there, and people will take notice. There are unfortunately some larger orgs who like to, I feel like, soak up all the glory, and like I've heard horror stories of them taking other people's work and credit, things like that, and it's no good. Um, but we're definitely not like that. So, if you've had an experience like that, I am sorry. I I don't like it. I don't like the orgs that do it. Um, but definitely like keep reaching out to people. Don't give up. Don't get disheartened. And try to raise your voice as much as you can. Just film yourself talking, even. Like so many people now, like we talk about the dangers of TikTok and the dangers of social media, but it can be such an important tool. And you can be, in your bathrobe with crazy hair that morning or whatever, and you've got something to say passionately. Just open up your phone, record yourself, say it. You don't even have to have video on at this point. Like, just put it out there. So, as long as you're consistent, it will get seen, and I think Nat can attest to that. The algorithms really, really like consistency. So, yeah, just start saying stuff, just get connected to who you can, and you can be a big help. I don't know how many women I've told on this platform, like, who don't feel like they're doing enough because they're just posting on X. They say like, "Oh, I'm just posting on X." But so many people see their stuff, and you don't know, you could change a mind. You could be that little spark in somebody that goes, I hadn't thought of that argument," or, "Yikes, that's a good point. I need to re-examine my stance on this maybe." So So yeah, just enough pressure, enough voices that will make a difference.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the other side of that, and it kind of goes back to where it made me think of this when you said some people want to be messaged a bunch to be able to remember. And I thought about my conversation with you before this space, my conversation with most of the women before the space. When I asked them to do the space, they're incredulous that why anyone, me, and it's like you do all this stuff, but that was kind of still your same reaction. And I think that's the other side of it for us as women is we have to constantly remind ourselves that it's okay to be strong and really good at something, and someone that people want to talk to, and that so I think that that's why we keep having these conversations. And it's one of the main reasons the red tent exists is so that women start realizing that yes, we want to, hear you, right? All right, so let's talk about don't feed the fears. What will you give us a little background on why you decided to write this book?
Sure. So, I had mentioned before that as a kid, I had a kind of a tumultuous childhood, and I was afraid a lot. And the adults around me were, I think that's the driving motivation for my family, like fear. It paralyzes them and it also motivates them to act. And I think that goes back to even them in Cuba. Like they were just this happy family in Cuba, and then Castro's communist regime came in. They had everything stripped from them. There were police and neighbors and stuff informing on each other and informing on the people and disappearing neighbors. And some of my family members were arrested by the communists because they didn't agree with the messaging publicly. And they were taken to these prisons. My family didn't know, like, are we going to see our sons again? Are we going to, like, what should we do? How are we going to feed our kids? And it thankfully motivated them enough to leave Cuba. But after getting here, they had a huge cloud of that trauma and that fear that stuck to them like glue, and they just could not shake it. So they ended up not being able to recognize the red flags and like deal with the new oppressor, which was my father, who was American, and constantly threatened them with, well, people are going to listen to me because I speak English and I can talk to the cops. And if you don't do what I say, I could have you deported. And like he couldn't legally. They became legal citizens, but they were always afraid. They were afraid anytime a cop pulled them over. And that anxiety just kind of spilled over into every aspect of their lives and really changed the whole family, based on, I didn't see them before, obviously, but based on what they told me and how they acted when it was just them versus them out in the world or them around my dad. Um, it was very different. So I grew up seeing fear everywhere, like in how much it controlled people. And so occasionally, my grandmother and my great grandmother, who mostly had a hand in raising me, um, they would say something inspiring about overcoming fear, or if someone else can do it, why can't you do it? And it was really beautiful to hear, even if they didn't always put it into practice themselves. So when my great grandmother passed away, I actually woke up from a dream about her, and I where she was telling me everything was going to be okay. And I woke up feeling really inspired, and the words just all came to me for the book, and I wrote it out, and I have the page from my sketchbook still where it's all written out. And then I started illustrating immediately and put it together. And it's just the whole thing is just, a love letter to whoever wants to read it, that you can do this, you can get out from fear. And it's not, fear itself is not this big, scary thing that's insurmountable, even though it might be filling your head with false beliefs. And even if it's making you just afraid and angry and sad and all of these things where it feels inescapable, it's possible to get out. It's possible that other people will help you. And even if you don't, you can eventually get out of it yourself. It takes a lot of strength and determination, but you can do it, and then you can get it under control and be able to tell yourself, like, hey, that's not reality talking. That's just, fear trying to take over. And so I say it's a book for all ages. Um, and I really believe that. I think it can value adults as well as kids. And I really hope that people can read it and feel empowered by it at any age. And yeah, so that was my goal in writing it. And I'm really would like to share it with as many people as possible.
I think that we as a society today, we're so easy to give in to our fears. When you say that we've kind of been that, and that's why self-diagnosis off of TikTok became such a good thing, right? Because it was feeding the fears. Um, when not, and we don't have, if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to. Growing up, you've told us now about your dad and what he would say to your relatives. Um, were you, for the most part, though, surrounded by pretty strong women, or no?
The strongest woman in my life was my great grandmother. She grew up in rural Cuba. Um, she was always walking around barefoot and doing all the stuff around the house. Like something needed to be repaired, she'd go do it, try her hand at it first before calling, my grandfather, who was a handyman and had a compulsive obsession with repairing lawnmowers. Like I say lawnmowers specifically because he has a huge collection, but so she would be out there and be like, well, something needs to get done. I'm going to do it. And she would, I mean, everybody in Florida will probably be able to relate to this, but you get some big old honking cockroaches out there. And living in the neighborhood that we lived in, we had a lot of them constantly in and out of the house, or snakes or whatever. This woman would just go like, whoop, she'd just step on one barefoot or grab a snake by the head or just whatever. She did not care. No qualms about any of it. And she was such a strong woman in those terms, and but she was also very compassionate. And one of her issues that I think passed on to me in that way was she had a big issue with boundaries. So if somebody was like my dad, or you know even her son, when he came to live with us because he was very ill with emphysema, he would be really nasty to her. But she's like, well, he's my son and I love him and it's okay. And so even if it was like he was being nasty to us or something, yes, she would be very firm and like yell at him. And same thing with my dad. But then at the same time, she'd be like, well, I don't want, bad I guess like bad vibes or bad energy in the family. So we really should repair the relationship and try to go on as peaceably as we can. And so while she was very strong and very tough, she also had this side of her where she was very bad at maintaining a firm boundary and making sure that we weren't around toxic elements. Although I will say part of the issue with my dad is she knew that if she was too harsh with him, he could potentially like
divorce my mom and take full custody, and she really didn't want him to do that. So that was something that I have to credit her for, is she did try to maintain peace just to make sure that we were still she could still protect us to the extent that she was able. But yeah, she was definitely my biggest inspiration for a strong woman. Like, and just again, seeing that a woman could have short hair, a woman could go repair something, a woman could walk around barefoot and step on bugs and grab snakes and and like be really handy, and she's still a woman. So she's probably my biggest inspiration in life. And she also, I mean, I know not everyone is religious, but and I wasn't for a long time, but she also taught me prayer, and I didn't know it was the Our Father prayer until I started going to English speaking churches, and I like heard it for the first time in English. And so yeah, it was really good to have her in my life. She's the my biggest inspiration in so many things. And my first daughter is named after her because had it not, I know this sounds morbid, but had it not been for her passing, I probably wouldn't have even gotten into the gender wars, because my way of coping is to try and solve a problem. And I just so happened to run across this problem. And I was like, well, maybe they just need somebody out there to like help explain things in a relatable way. So I'll go, get in this debate and I'll change some minds. I was so naive. I was on the roller coaster, the roller coaster incoming.
Oh yes.
And so I was like all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like, I'll fix this, I'll help. And now I'm definitely on the way back with the roller coaster. I'm one of the skeleton ladies now. But yeah, so if it had not been for her, I would not have gotten into this. I wouldn't have met Zach. I wouldn't have my daughter. I wouldn't have like any of the things that I have now. And yeah, so that's my strong woman, I guess, that I constantly think about as when I am asked that question.
It does change you, doesn't it? Like I wouldn't give up the life I've lived if it meant I didn't have my son. Um
Yeah.
so it's part of that whole surviving girlhood thing. Uh so your great grandmother grew up in rural Cuba. What is that? What was that in the 50s that she was there, or the 40s?
No, she was actually she was born in, I think, 1901, I
Whoa.
think. Yeah. So or no, it was before that. She was born, I think, 1890 something, and she died in 2020. So, yeah, it was around there, something like she was just, like, into her hundreds. I forget, like, where she was exactly, but she went through rural Cuba. Her mother her mother's family was from the Canary Islands in Spain. They were Jews who migrated through the Canary Islands and then settled there and then came down to Cuba. And so she had a very fair skinned, light haired mother, and her mother couldn't even read. But I guess she was a very strong woman as well. She often told me this story of her mother really wanted to see something change in the village, like the pueblo where they lived. And so her mother marched on down to the little, I'm not really sure like what the official's name was, but the local official's office. And, there are all these men there and they're well to do. And she said, her mom was like, okay, stay right here. I'm going to go into this office and talk to this man. And she just marched in there and she said her piece and, basically argued with this guy, debated with him, and came back out. And then she got what she wanted, I guess. But it was something that stuck with her and something that sticks with me, that here's this woman that couldn't even read. She's got all these children because, there's no birth control at that time. And that it's not like they had the best biological literacy on like when you could get pregnant versus when you couldn't, and ovulation and that sort of thing. So, but she still managed to like take her kids down the way, get into that guy's office, talk to him, get something changed, and come back out. So I don't know, maybe
I think
I've
the
got activism in
entertainment
my roots a little bit.
industry, yeah, I think the entertainment industry has sold us a bill of goods that is not good, because time after time, a recurring theme across storyteller are stories of women in a time frame that we've been told women couldn't be, weren't, not that they couldn't be strong by law, I'm just saying in general that there weren't strong women, that most women 100 years ago were meek, and I think, and that's because of the entertainment industry, right, has showed us, when they show us period pieces, it's either women are being catty with each other or they're fainting, right? And I think this is really interesting about your great grandmother and her mother, because we all know that women are the last to get literacy, that hands down. And for her to be that strong in a rural community on an island. Now, can I just ask you real quick? And I apologize, I was lagging. I didn't mean to speak over you. You were gone and then you were back, and I'm sorry for that. Um, did did your great grandmother ever talk about Cuba before and after Castro, or was that just something I've heard stories, because when I was living in South Florida in college, there I went to college with people whose grandparents, it was still too painful, right, to talk about. So I'm just wondering, was that, do you think that shaped her at all, or what, just how different was it for her as a woman before and after?
So it definitely did shape all of the members of my family, but slightly differently, I think, for men and women. It definitely seemed like the women felt less like they could speak out, like they would be like retribution was going to be harsher for them. Um, they did talk about it a lot, but it's still hard for them even now, even though a lot of them are very elderly and dying, and I still have family there. Um, and so the last vestiges of my family that are in Cuba, they're now passing away as well. But as far as like what it was like before and after, my family, so my great grandmother and her family, they were very rural, but then she married a man who was a dean of a college, and he had been in the army, and he had done very well for himself. So they were able to move more like closer to like a more civilized like town rather than out in the country. And she was able to send her daughters to school, which she had to send them, I guess, a little ways away to like an all girls school, because it was very important to her that the girls had a place just for girls where they wouldn't be like around boys and things like that, that might be a distraction or might be not the healthiest place, because she knew, boys are not always respectful of girls' bodies. And it was important to her that her daughters felt empowered and were around other women. Um, and so she sent her girls there, and her boy was a big troublemaker. And after Castro came into power, he was one of the family members who ended up being arrested for rebelling against the regime. And they actually gave him the choice of, you will either be executed or we will exile you to America. And so obviously he chose America. My family followed. They came in waves, kind of. And it was difficult for them because none of them spoke English. None of them knew what the culture was going to be like. It was, you're going to a foreign country, and not just a foreign country for them, but the type of foreign country that like it's you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, like it's not as it wasn't as necessarily like insular as Cuba had been. And so they weren't sure what to expect really, but they were hoping it was similar to Cuba before Castro, which I heard it was. So they were fortunate in that regard. Um, but yeah, they were, like I said earlier, they were changed from this very positive group of people who felt empowered and secure and able to thrive to this group of people who were very distrustful of authority and never really felt safe ever again. And even now, my grandmother will panic if she sees like a cop and they're pulling you over for like a traffic stop or something. She totally panics. She would have us as kids hide in the car if a cop was coming to like, issue like a warning for speeding or running a stop sign or something like that. So, um, I never really understood why that was until I was older, but it definitely shaped them for sure.
Do you hope that someday you can take your children to where your family's from?
I do, and my grandmother, my great-grandmother's daughter, she would like to go back just to see because they all kinda lived in this, little villa together. Like, it's a really big family, like, so it was my grandfather's side of the family, my grandmother's side of the family with, like, all the parents and all the kids and, brothers and sisters and everybody just all kinda lived in this little community, and they actually did find it on Google Maps, and the house is still there, like, it's this big house with, like, the little houses kind of around it, and it's just derelict on the beach, and it's gorgeous, like, the location is beautiful, and I can see why they were so sad to have left it, like, this was a generational family home where they were bringing in because my grandfather's family, his mother's side of the family actually had a province in Cuba that was named after them, they were very well-to-do, but so they had this little kind of family it's almost like their own little village because there were so many of them. And so I really do wanna go and be able to see that and kind of get a feel for, I guess, the ghosts of the past, we're gonna be dramatic, but, like, where they came from and how they might have felt at the time and that sort of thing. So all I have now are just old photos and stories.
Yeah, I think most of us
So
have we have the luxury of, even though we may never go to where our family's from, there's nothing that's necessarily a huge blockade of us doing so. And so I just kind of wondered if you had hopes to someday show the kids, but since your great grandmother was such a huge influence, I think that that's amazing. What do you think? Because you lost her in 2020. What do you think she would say about what you've done over the past 6 years, 5 years, five
she
and change?
she was, always the biggest supporter of my writing and my artwork, and honestly, like, me having, um, like, a passion for activism and ideals and stuff like that. I loved talking to her just about anything, like politics, religion, science, and she was always so engaged, much more so than her daughter, which was interesting. I think because her daughter was a little bit more metropolitan, like my her daughter is very much a girly girl, and, she cringes anytime she sees that my legs aren't shaved or something, it's hilarious. I love going to her house specifically with unshaved legs just to horrify her, it's, like, always something that brings me a laugh. But, as far as my great-grandmother, she was always really proud of me, um, and I think she would be really supportive, because her daughter, like I said, is a little bit more metropolitan, a little bit more affected by the police state and things that she experienced in Cuba. So when I first got started in doing this, She was terrified. She told me not to do it. She thought I was going to be killed. She thought that me speaking out and um, stepping out of the crowd, so to speak, was wrong because she was really afraid for my safety. Um, and I kept telling her that, see, that's why I need to do it, is because you lost your country. I can't afford to lose my country. I can't afford to lose reality. I have nowhere else to go. You had America. I don't have anything. So this is why I have to, is knowing my history. I have to speak up because I know what happened to you. And now she is more supportive. Now they really like that we go to DC, that we talk to lawmakers, that we've been able to do as much as we've done. She thinks it's silly that it's sex. She thinks it's something that should just be obvious to people, that women are women and men are men. You can't change your sex and that sort of thing. But um, she does understand why it's so important, and she is supportive now. But I think my great grandmother would have been 100% on board the whole time. And I think it's because she had more time with life before Castro. She had the stories of her mom going and kind of being an activist and realizing change for where they lived. So yeah, I think she'd be really proud and supportive.
I thought I'd come in and go back a bit in time because one of the main focus for you in your life is your own personal experience of thinking that you were in the wrong body. And you've written about your own childhood and how difficulties for many children in fitting in can bring this kind of disconnect to the body, especially those with trauma and living in chaotic circumstances. So, how did you come to terms with being a girl? What happened in that?
So my mother was a big contributing factor in me thinking that I was meant to be a boy as well. Um, because my mom hated being female. She does not get along with other women. She hates other women. She's incredibly misogynistic. Um, I always thought growing up, like when you're in gender distress, right? Like, or distress over your sex body, you're so deluded and focused on that distress that you are not realizing the contributing factors. You're not logically processing what it is that you're attributing to being born in the wrong body, right? So all of the things that she was telling me, like, you were meant to be a boy, you were supposed to be a boy. See, I told you, this is why boys are better than girls. I mean, even so far as her messaging around like bodies, so that the female body was disgusting, that the female body was lesser, that male bodies were better and cooler, and even their genitals were better. My grandmother, bless her heart, she didn't realize what she was doing, but she also contributed by saying, women's genitals are dirty. We have to wash ourselves at least 3 times a day. If you don't, you will grow worms out of your vagina. Because she was trying to get me to like just go wash 3 times a day. Like she had this compulsion to do this. Her mother did not do this. She did. And obviously her messaging passed out to my mother. And so my mother's response was rejection of femaleness, like in every conceivable way. And then, at school, I did not fit in with the girls. I was more atypical in my interests. I liked building things. I liked taking things apart. I liked rough and tumble play. I liked sports. Um, and I couldn't really, like, the girls wanted to do things on the playground, like have more interpersonal games, going back to being very young. And so I didn't understand like the social hierarchy and stuff like that with the girls at school. So it just kind of all combined into me kind of affirming, like, okay, so I don't belong with the girls, like 100% I don't. And I was clearly like, my mom was right. I was meant to be a boy. But then you have the messaging on TV that it's okay for, to be a tomboy. So I was like, okay, so there's that. And by the time I got to puberty, I was starting to come out of this belief that I was meant to be a boy. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just a weird girl. And I'm starting to get along with girls now because the boys are wanting to separate and do their own thing. So I'd better find some other awkward girls to get along with. And thankfully I did. I found a lovely group of nerdy girls who loved books just like I did and were more atypical. And it's like, okay, great. But then I was raped. And then I was like, okay, I actually hate being female. And had I been male, this wouldn't have happened, which is a lie. You can still be raped as a male. It doesn't matter. And then after the rape, my father started sexually abusing and trafficking me. And I felt so alone and I hated myself so much. And I hated my body. And I had really difficult periods as well, which did not help. I had endometriosis. So sometimes at school, even if I changed my pad, I would come home and I didn't realize that, the whole back of my jeans was covered in blood. I had no idea. No one told me. And here I was like home now, and I'd go to change my clothes and I'd see that the whole seat of my pants is red and no one told me. So it was just, there was nothing good about being female to me at that point. And then finally, I wanted to go into plastic surgery. That was what I wanted to do. Ultimately, I wanted to be a doctor. I could use my creative skill set and become a plastic surgeon and help people feel better about themselves was how I reasoned it. And so I used to watch videos of surgeries all the time. Like I was just fascinated by them. And um, I decided to go ahead and look up gender reassignment surgery, which at the time was sex reassignment surgery. And I was horrified. I was like, well, that's not going to give me what I want. Like, I'm not going to suddenly become like a man, like this ideal of a man that I have in my head. So like, I'll probably just like come out, you know, frumpy and balding and with some kind of like Frankenstein version of a penis that's not actually a penis. And the function isn't there, and you've got all these complications. So I'm gonna have to figure something else out. So I remembered going back to the talk shows that there was a type of therapy where these women with anorexia had found a lot of connection with their bodies again, because that was something that I knew was a factor, was dissociation from the body. Where they had taken artistic nude photos with a photographer who worked with them on lighting and poses and stuff like that to kind of like romanticize, but also help them associate with their bodies more. And because you're part of the process, you're physically engaging in these poses and you're physically engaging in the space. And then you're able to look at the photos afterwards and associate with it. And it was different than like taking like like a selfie or a picture with your family or something. So I found a photographer in California when I moved there, who did something similar with women coming out of the BDSM community who were disassociating, women who were postpartum who were disassociating. And I was his first gender dysphoric, sex dysphoric, whichever one you want to go with, uh, like client, or I don't even want to say client because I wasn't paying him. But person, I guess, that he worked with. He did everything for free for the women and stuff like that. So, because he had been a photographer for years and he was a survivor of rape. And so he really wanted to help other survivors and people who were dissociating from their bodies, and it was mostly women. So I was his first one that was experiencing that sex rejection. And the first day I got there, he was like talking to me about everything and how I felt, and he wanted me to be realistic because he was like, there was one photo in particular, and I remember like showing it to him, one that he had taken that I had seen of this woman, and she looked very masculine in the photo. And I was like, oh, if I could look like that, that's what I want. And he was very serious with me. And he said, I cannot make you look like that because that is not what you look like. You do not look masculine. But I will show you what you do look like, and we can go from there. And it was the first time anyone had been that real with me about like what was possible, what was realistic for me physically, because I had no idea. I was totally delusional. I thought I was very broad-shouldered. I thought, I had all these masculine features, like, oh, my jaw's too square, like I said, my shoulders are too broad, my feet are too big. And that's obviously not the case. And so we worked together for probably 3 years, and it was a very transformative experience. I got to meet a lot of the other women, and it was really healing to be able to be around other women and learn about that and how they were feeling, and just to be like, wow, okay, so it's really similar experiences. It's just manifested and expressed differently depending on who we are, but we're all kind of feeling that dissociation. And so that was extremely healing. And then being able to like see my body as this positive thing instead of something I needed to run from. And then after that, I still was terrified of going to a therapist. Like I was like, I don't know. I just had this whole negative concept of therapists, which I still do to an extent. And so I went to a hypnotherapist after that to deal with all of my past trauma. And that was very helpful too, because it helped me, again, be grounded in my body, be grounded in reality, and come to terms with that, and like have my boundaries and be able to exercise them, and have coping skills and certain physical cues. Being able to relate psychology to the physical body was very important through both of those. And I was in a really good place. But then after my great grandmother died, I really kind of lost myself again. I started down that rabbit hole. Unfortunately, like I got isolated by an AGP who was pretending to be my friend, but then slowly trying to groom me again into feeling like, oh, well, you could change your name just for you. And it really wouldn't be, I mean, you could just do microdosing of testosterone. You could do this and that. And he just kind of trying to put into my head that I should transition. And he was heinous. And I realized, because I was coming off of birth control as well, because it had atrophied my vagina in a really bad way, and I was in a lot of pain from the nerve pain. And so I was going through a lot of like a lot of emotional distress. And so it all came back to I relapsed into that thinking of hating my body. And so I got finally away from him and put up that boundary. And then I started talking more to other women. I started talking to Zach more. And the more I talked about the arguments against gender ideology and feeling empowered just through reality, the better I felt again. And I can safely say now that and then having a daughter too was transformative. I did not think I would be able to do that. I did not think, even while I was pregnant, I was like having panic attacks early on because I was like so horrified that I would be going through this very female experience. And it was just really healing ultimately. Like the more I grounded myself in reality, the more I embraced my body, and the more I embraced being female, the better I felt. And so I can honestly say I don't struggle with the feelings of gender distress anymore. I don't struggle with like, oh, I hate being female, or this sucks and whatever. Like, yeah, some things do suck, but having the flu sucks. Like, I'm I don't want to be like not a human anymore. So yeah, like that's where I am now. I don't struggle with it at all. I hope that lasts forever. I hope I never go back to that way of thinking. Um, I know when it's things like a body dysmorphic disorder, like you can have relapses and things like that, but yeah, since having my daughter, I haven't felt that way at all, like not even a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just in a really good place, and there's a lot of things that contributed to it, and it all kind of built on each other. And so that's my best advice for anybody who feels that way is just, keep talking, keep figuring out like the root causes, ground yourself, um, and talk to other people because honestly, you'll find out that you're not special in your pain necessarily. There are other people who have similar pain that went through something different or whatever. So it's not like it doesn't mean that you have to be something just because you have a specific pain or you're feeling dissociative or what have you.
It must have been a really difficult part of the psychology to separate out yourself from your mother's absolute hatred of being female, and that she was really wanting you to reject being female, and presumably she was wanting a son for you to be a boy. And that must have been a particularly hard part of the whole dysphoria.
Yeah, absolutely. And she would always tell me and my sister developed an eating disorder. That was how her dissociative identity took over was she developed bulimia. And then I went the route of embracing that I was supposed to be a boy. But yeah, it was really difficult. And I unfortunately am not on speaking terms with her right now because she decided to go back to my father, which was very difficult. But when we were on speaking terms, when they were separated, I asked her, I think I have it recorded somewhere, I have to find it, but I did talk to her about that. And I asked her about it because she was a huge fan of I Am Jazz too. Like for her, it like validated everything she said to me, which was weird because she didn't necessarily want me to go through a medical transition, but she did think that I was meant to be male. She's a very strange person, but um she she said she didn't really know why she hated women so much and that it was just she never got along with them and she never did this and that. So I think it was probably too that my grandmother is very hyper feminine. And so my mom's first exposure to women is hyper femininity, right? Outside of, her grandmother, my great grandmother. But her direct link was her mother and the hyper femininity. And my mom couldn't hit those markers or didn't want to meet those markers. So she just kind of came into her experiences with other women with that background of, well, I'm not hyper feminine, so they're obviously not going to like me. I'm not going to fit in. And then she just kind of was defensive anytime she met another woman. And as soon as like the woman would say something or do something that she didn't like, then it validated her experience. Like even at school, like girls at school being, cliquey or whatever, it was like, oh, yep, I knew it. I knew I wasn't going to fit in with them. They just, nope, can't do that. And the friends that she made, she had her falling outs with them and whatever. And she attributed it to, it's because they're women and I can't get along with women because women are terrible. And it just kind of, that was her automatic go-to her whole life. Like she just did that all the time. And she would always say that, like things like that to me, like, see, I told you, women are bitches. I told you, you can't get along with any of them. And it was like, it was really difficult because it was like, we're women, like, we're females, mom. Like, so are we bitches because we don't, we're just females, or is our hatred of women supposed to enlighten us or make us better? Like as an introspective kid, it was a question that I had, but I couldn't necessarily like articulate or feel like I could ask her without retribution at the time. And talking to her as an adult about it and posing those questions to her, it was kind of interesting because I could see like how she hadn't thought about it. And she was agreeing with me that she had like this misplaced animosity towards women and womanhood. And she wasn't quite sure where it came from. And we were really like occasionally when I could talk to her about that sort of thing and be serious with her, it was something to watch the wheels turn. She did apologize to me for being that way, and she did say that it was wrong. So there is a part of her that recognizes that now.
I think it shows how far you've come in that you could be grounded in your reality of who you were and to recognize how much the trauma that she'd been through had affected her and be able to, in a way, confront all of that she had brought you into your childhood. That was really brave of you to do that.
Thank you. It wasn't easy because it got very emotional sometimes. She's very quick to anger. So, and when she's angry, she just kind of blows up and lashes out. But it was something that I felt like I needed to do, especially as a mother to a daughter, to be able to just like because at the time I did want her to be in my daughter's life. And so I was like, if you are going to be in my daughter's life, you will not speak that way about women. That is a very firm boundary that I have, is that if you are going to speak negatively about women, and attributed it to their womanhood, then you're not welcome around my daughter. I do not want her to ever feel what I felt, that confusion, that self-loathing over her sex because someone attributes being lesser or being a certain way to women. And men obviously, like, they have their faults, women have their faults. It's very individual. And anybody can be a jerk. Anybody can be like someone you don't get along with, or if like, oh, I knew that person was going to be like such a jerk or whatever. Like, it doesn't mean it's because of their sex. So that's been a very firm boundary. And that's also something that I want to cover in the sex ed curriculum going forward is, yes, men and women on average have different ways of expressing emotion or ideas or whatever, but it doesn't mean that one or the other is better or lesser because of their behavior or their expression. It's, hormones can be a contributing factor, but life experience can be a contributing factor, but it's not because you're, a woman and that means that you are this just 100% inclined to be this bitchy person, or because you're a man, you're 100% inclined to be, a misogynistic a-hole. So yeah, that's something I really want to drive home as well as I can, with kids in general. Like, we need to get away from this thinking that's similar to where my mom was. And I'm still not necessarily sure where that came from outside of her own like attribution and resentment for like her experience. But maybe one day I'll know if we ever get on speaking terms again. I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's all part of where we are in this movement of the recognition of the situation for women and girls in general, and how in bad situations, women and girls can really start hating being female, and that this is a path into this really dangerous ideology, as well as just a complete pessimism and hopelessness about the world, and that bringing girls into a world where they are celebrated for who they are and teaching them about boundaries, as you were saying earlier, is so important. And I'm just really pleased that you're now bringing it into your writing so that it's going out to girls all over the world. And if there's anybody that wants to come up and ask Cynthia a question or have a comment, then do put your hand up.
I'm an open book, so I will answer anything as honestly as I can. So,
Well, while we're waiting to bring people up, let's talk about what's next for you.
so like I said, I'm writing out the curriculum for the boys and girls. That is going to include, like I said, a lot on boundaries and also coping skills. And I do want to include sections on how it impacts mood and relationships too, like how your changing hormones can influence that. And a lot of people don't know this, but where, we talk about women's cycles constantly, males actually go through a cycle as well. Theirs is a 24-hour cycle, women's is the 28-day cycle. So it's interesting because we get a lot of messaging in society that's like, oh, women in their cycles, they're so unpredictable and they're so emotional and they do hysterics and this and that. But we know men can also be very emotional and get into hysterics and all of that. I mean, I know the word hysterics comes from, the Greek root or whatever is for histo and whatever, but you know what I mean? Like they can get moody. So yeah, it's interesting. So I want to talk about that too. That's part of how I plan to introduce the idea to kids that, hey, it's not necessarily your sex that is, it means you're going to be more or less emotional. You're just going to express it in a different way because of how these hormones influence things like crying, things like anger, and things like your emotions or urges towards the opposite sex, or your romantic feelings, I guess. So yeah, that's more of where I'm going with it, rather than being the way a lot of the framing is done now is like consent and sex and kink, and it's like, but this is not teaching kids about emotional regulation and like helping them understand why they might be feeling a certain way, which I really think is necessary for like teenagers to learn, especially because they are just a little bomb of emotions ready to go off at any time.
I wanted to ask you a little bit because we always like to get a little nugget of advice if we can when we have women join us. We talked about the book writing and possibility of a lot more. But what would be the other thing that you've done is podcasts? So, what would be the piece of advice and yesterday earlier you told us about when we were asking about networking, gave us that. So let's say a woman decides she wants to have a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever she wants to do. What would be the advice that you would give a woman who was thinking about doing that?
My advice is to just start, anywhere, start anywhere, whether it's spaces or whether it's just recording by yourself and having some essay that you wrote and you want to just read every week or 2 weeks. Get your voice out there, and you can just build an audience that way. It's so easy now to start building an audience, even if it's just 10 people who tune in a week. That's 10 people, and those 10 people can show it to other people, and it's amazing that we have this ability to communicate this way. And women have always done this really well. I've noticed, just going back and looking at history, women will go and they will find people to talk to, and they will start changing minds and talking to each other and building those networks, the whisper networks and things like that. That is something women have always excelled at. And I think now more than ever, so many women are tuning into each other just to listen to things like breakup advice. So just to be able to go out and be like, hey, you know what, ladies, if this makes you uncomfortable, it's making you, it's something you need to look at and examine. And if it's something that you're not sure how to articulate, here's a way that you might be able to think about it. And so that's one piece of advice. The other piece of advice is if you want to interview people, just DM them. Like it's really, I like, just bite the bullet and do it and be professional, obviously, but just DM them and be courteous and invite them on to talk to you, about their ideas, and just shoot your shot, because if you don't, it's never going to happen. So just go for it. If the person doesn't respond, it's not because they don't like you. It's not because they think you're too small of a creator. A lot of these people are more than willing to go on to small podcasts. A lot of these people are more than willing to help you build your audience. So it's probably just because they didn't see it. So try again later down the line. Or tag them, or find out their contact information, like an email or something. See if anyone else has a connection that you know. So just shoot your shot, go for it, put your voice out there. You don't have to be perfect. Like, go look at reference on YouTube or TikTok or anywhere. There's people talking in their pajamas. Like, so yeah, just go out there. Another big one is to help you with your audience, maybe think about like a brand or a theme that you want to try and cultivate. It could be like an article of clothing, like a scrunchie. It could be an outfit, and that could even be like your little moment. Like, you get dressed and you know that when you have that outfit on, it's go time, it's show time. You're 100% confident you can do this. People are going to listen to you, and it'll help you kind of get into that character, so to speak, of like, I got this. It's time to go and put my message out there today. So that's the three things I can advise people on, for starting a podcast.
Well, you overcame your fear that said, whether you subconsciously or not, to start writing when you were a child. You overcame your fear as you became an adult and you were a writer. You overcame so many different fears. I was wondering if we could bother you, if you would read us just a short passage from Don't Feed the Fears, if you wouldn't mind. Um, just one that stands out in your head that you would like us to hear.
Sure, I can go pull it up just a second.
Thank you. And while Cynthia is doing that, I just wanted to say that I think that a lot of the times, and son, you might disagree with me this or not. I'm seeing patterns of women that are breaking free from the generational trauma of the women that came before them. It's time and time again we're hearing stories how women have broken that cycle.
No, I think that's true, and I think always women are seeking to do that. I think I think we do our mothers and grandmothers a disservice to think that they weren't trying that as well, and that we are always going to be the new generation that are going to do it. Women have always wanted to do this. Women have always been fighting and trying to make their life and their life of their kids better. But we're just going to keep doing it. We're always going to keep doing it. And, Cynthia's talking about having these tools for confidence, tools for overcoming fear, tools for moving, tools for feeling comfortable in your body. These are all really important skills to have.
Yeah, definitely. And just when it comes to overcoming trauma, I think a lot of people get stuck in resenting the women who passed the trauma down, and they're not really able to fully understand, or even want to understand, like, why those women may have been that way and what may have contributed. And it's hard because you are wounded and you are feeling like that should have never happened to me. And you're 100% right. It should have never happened. It was unacceptable. But also understanding where their trauma came from can help you understand where yours came from, because it helps you kind of see their humanity and see how they were wounded and how that was a trauma response for them. And that it wasn't necessarily because we can blame ourselves too, is that's the other thing. We end up blaming ourselves that I was treated this way because I was XYZ, or I was a burden on my mother, or my mother didn't like me. We didn't get along because of this, or I should have done this differently. No, you're not at fault for your trauma. So it just being able to understand all of those moving parts can help you untangle things and see the humanity in it and help you kind of heal those feelings of like self-blame and doubt, that really kind of can just cement in that feeling of resentment and whatever. And it's not good for you to feel those things. I'm not saying like go make up 100% with the people who hurt you, but understanding can help you let go of a lot of that rage and things that just make you feel so sick sometimes. Because I mean, just I think anyone who's a trauma survivor has those moments where you're just sitting in it like a memory, or you're sitting in the whole of it and you're thinking about it, and then before you know it, 3 hours have passed and you've just kind of been sitting brooding, choking on your tears for all that time in the dark, and you're like, "Oh my god, like what happened to my day?" So just being able to help you move past that is understanding and seeing the human parts of trauma and the human parts of all of the things that go on in there. So that's part of breaking the generational trauma, because then it helps you prevent doing those things, or how you talk to your kids going forward. Like when my mom was angry, or how my mom responded to a stressful situation impacted how she spoke to us in that moment. And so then when I speak to my daughter, when I'm stressed out or I'm already upset, or the situation is upsetting, I can now take a breath and separate myself from that stress and figure out the best way to talk to her. So I don't go purely on reaction like my mom did. So that's helpful too. I found the passage, by the way.
Go for it. We're looking forward to it.
Okay. So my favorite passage is at the end, um, because it echoes all of the other things in the book. But it's a part of every one of us, if you recall. And when it's under control, it's no enemy at all. So treat your fear like you would a dear friend. Listen to its warnings, but to its will never bend. Please don't feed your fear even when you are grown, but recall if you do that you're never alone. Because, I wanted people to remember that fear can be helpful. That's something else in the book, is you don't want to get rid of fear entirely, because if you listen to it in the right situations, it'll definitely save you from some bad things. But if you let it take over, that's where the trouble is. So working with it is better than trying to work against it, for sure, because then you just hurt yourself in a different way, like not having boundaries. We all have seen that video where I think it was the Canadian government was trying to demonize that woman who walked out of the elevator when that giant troon walks in. She's like, nope, not sharing the elevator with this guy. And it's like, no, she listened. She was feeling afraid of this big delusional man who walked into an enclosed space with her. She did the right thing and left the situation. So that's a moment where fear was helpful in telling you, hey, if you need to protect yourself, get out of there. So yeah, just that's where fear can be helpful. A situation where fear can be unhelpful is when you're totally paralyzed and you can't make a decision and you can't leave your house and you're just afraid of, what people might say. Again, if you don't have your legs shaved or something small like that. I've known women who didn't want to leave the house because they didn't shave their legs and they didn't have clean laundry except for shorts or something because it was Florida. And they're like, I can't go out. I haven't shaved my legs. What are people going to say? And it's like, who cares? Just go, go out with your hairy legs. No one's going to even notice, and it's okay. So even small things like that can paralyze people. So just, yeah, all of these things are kind of covered in that last passage. And also the message that you're never really alone. There's always somebody there in the world somewhere, especially now that we're so connected online, that can help you if you're like really freaking out in some way. Thankfully, like, especially now in this community of women who are so connected over fighting gender ideology, like, we can often reach out to a friend and be like, I'm really having a hard time right now. I need a friend. And you've got like 10 of them in your DMs. So,
It's true. I don't think any of us expected. I mean, social media didn't start 5 years ago, but I don't think any of us expected to bond with women that, if this wasn't happening, we probably wouldn't have come across each other on social media. And those relationships, they're never tested by distance, and that's what's really amazing about it. So I just wanted to say, real quick, what are your plans going forward with, as far as, do you have anything on the horizon that you're working on specifically for kids going forward?
definitely. So, I've got so many books in the chamber that I'm working on, as well as with the curriculum. So I'm hopefully going to be releasing a lot more this year. I am also working on developing an animated show for kids that I've got one of the characters built out and everything. I'm rigging it now, and trying to get the rig to cooperate. The rig is basically the bones that make the character move. But it's just it's fun to be able to use all of these skills, and like that people are interested and that there is such a need for this. But definitely a lot of kids content. I'd like to maybe do some more personal writing for women, just sharing my experiences and things like that. I actually have a very funny story that I wanted to share with you guys because I thought you would appreciate it. It's a very female centric, like, multi-generational story. I know that's kind of been the whole theme of this, but um I just had this happen yesterday and I was like, it's like, I would just love to share this with you guys. So I was on the phone with my grandmother and we were talking about the childbirth and everything, and she goes back to, oh well, thank goodness they shave you, like shave your pubic area because it's just so unsightly. And and I was like, what, who, they don't do that anymore, first of all. And she was so horrified by that. And I was like, and second of all, who is it unsightly for? They're medical professionals helping you give birth, and there's blood and fluid everywhere, and there's a baby coming out of you. Like, no one's gonna care about whether or not your legs are shaved or your pubic area is shaved. And she was like, "Oh, you haven't even shaved your legs?" And and she was so horrified by this whole thing. And it was just such a, because she, like, back in the day, they used to shave you as part of the standard procedure in the hospital. They did that in the States as well. And it was just so funny to hear her reactions. And she was like, well, you have to look good. And I was like, for who? Like, my, Zach doesn't care. He's like seen me with hairy legs and he knows what's going on. He's not going to care about like whether or not I'm perfectly shaved or not. There's a baby being delivered. Like that's something that's way more important. And it just illustrated to me like so many things in that moment that there are so many women still who are consumed by this idea. Like we think it's kind of new with like influencers and stuff, like consumed with looking perfect. But even back then, like in the 60s when she's giving birth, she's back then thinking, oh, I'd better look my best. Like I can't go looking, like I'm not perfectly groomed when I'm giving birth and in labor during a hurricane. I have to look perfect. So I just thought it was such a, I don't know, such an illustrative moment of women and the messaging around our bodies and stuff that has gone on for decades now.
Well, look at television in the 50s, right, and early 60s. They wanted everyone to believe that babies were made by people sleeping in two separate twin beds.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then, of course, the other thing was like, here she is talking about how unsightly the pubic area is when it's not shaved. And I'm like, when, gosh, like that was still like a relatively new concept, like in the 60s. It's not like women had been shaving their whole bodies, like, save for the head, for that long at that point. So, but it's just illustrative of how pervasive that idea that women need to like shave off all of our body hair was, even like on a tiny island where they don't have like American television. They have just whatever they had at the time. I think mostly radio there, but that was the cultural expectation that had spread even there. So it was just really something to have that conversation with her, and I was just cracking up because it's such a stark difference, like how, I don't know, I guess how worried she was, how fearful, for lack of a better term, but like how fearful she was of people seeing me like not shaved during my birth, which like, is so silly.
Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today. I already knew you were amazing. I'm very glad that more women have gotten an opportunity to hear today. When should we expect? And if please go follow Cynthia. Please follow the Paradox Institute. Cynthia has graciously written, and it's on the Red Tent site as well. Um, so yeah, I just want to really thank you for coming in. Is there any last thing you'd like to say to our audience?
Just that you're all wonderful, and I love that we can all be part of this community. And yeah, I love seeing all this support for women, by women. It's amazing. And this has grown so much from when I first got into this debate. And to be coming from more of a leftist, like pro TRA side, to like it was the women who changed me into like full blown turf. And they've just been so great at doing that, and also so wonderful and embracing people who are coming from the other side of this, even when they're like super harsh. Like, and you're like, dang, like, why are they so mean? And it's like, they're not mean, they're exercising their boundaries and they're exercising their voices. And I'm so proud of every single one of you who's in there in a thread arguing for 2 days with some idiot TRA. You're all just lionesses in your own right. And I'm so heartened every day by all of the women involved in this.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for coming on, and all the best. I know it's really soon. Hope everything goes really, really well and that you really enjoy your new child. And looking to our next storyteller, we're going to have on the incredible Skylar. It's due on the 5th of February. She's going to be coming on talking about her life, her activism, and coming out late as lesbian. So do join us for that.
Yes, thank you so much. What we have another announcement. I have put down in the Purple Pill. Turf Pack is now live on the Red Tent site. We all she wolves should go check it out. It's the newest thing that we are offering. It's an opportunity to support us. It's an opportunity to wear all of the suffragette colors because we kind of went a little crazy and made a flag that incorporated all four colors since America has to be difficult with the yellow. I know. Please go check it out. Please go check out the Red Tent site. Cynthia's episode of Red Tent Storyteller will be available through the Scarlet Frequency across all platforms. And just once again, and then, Monday, American Turf Radio with myself, Pija, and Emmy. And then on Wednesday, we have the summit with Carol and Cosbar. So thank you once again, Cynthia, for coming. It's been awesome. I'm going to have to pick your brain for some recipes now that I know that your great grandmother was from rural Cuba, because usually if you put rural in front of anything, the recipes gain about 10 times the deliciousness. So we'll have to have a conversation about that. Thank you, Hazel Moon, once again for being an awesome co host, as always. And we will be back in 2 weeks with Skylar. And thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.